Our next guest is a Grammy Award winner and a member of the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame.
Ladies and gentlemen, our next guest is a Grammy Award winner and a proud member of the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, the legendary Bob Seger. His journey began as a gritty Michigan rocker, rising from the same garage rock roots that shaped bands like Mitch Ryder and the Rationals, before evolving into one of the defining voices of heartland rock. By blending the raw drive of Detroit rock with deep soul and R&B influences, Bob Seger created a sound that felt unmistakably American and connected with millions across generations. This is the story of his life, his struggles, his triumphs, and the moment he finally stepped away from the stage. Bob Seger was born on May 6, 1945, at Henry Ford Hospital in Detroit, Michigan, to parents Charlotte and Stuart Seger. When he was 5 years old, his family moved to Ann Arbor along with his older brother George. Music filled their home early on, even though his father worked as a medical technician for Ford Motor Company. Despite that musical atmosphere, Seger's childhood was far from peaceful. His parents argued often, and in 1956, when Bob was just 10 years old, his father suddenly left for California, leaving the family facing serious financial challenges. Even then, Seger found comfort in music. He attended Tappan Junior High School and later graduated from Ann Arbor High School in 1963, where he also excelled in track and field. Through the instability around him, music became his escape, inspired by artists like Little Richard and Elvis Presley. One defining moment came when he bought his first record, Come Go With Me, by the Dell Vikings, a purchase that helped ignite a lifelong passion. By 1961, Seger was already stepping into Detroit's music scene, fronting a band called the Decibels. Alongside Pete Stanger and R.B. Hunter, he showcased his skills on guitar, piano, keyboards, and vocals. A demo recording earned brief radio play, fueling his determination. After the Decibels faded away, Seger joined the Town Criers, performing crowd-pleasing songs while expanding his sound through influences like James Brown and the Beatles. His ambition to break into radio success grew stronger, but the road ahead wasn't smooth. He joined Doug Brown and the Omens, contributing vocals to R&B-driven performances and recording what became his first officially released track. Not long after, controversy surrounding a parody recording caused the song to be pulled, but during that period Seger met Edward "Punch" Andrews, the manager who would guide much of his career. With Andrews and Dave Leone, Seger became deeply involved in Detroit's local music scene, writing songs for other artists and proving his versatility. Determined to step forward under his own name, Seger recorded East Side Story in 1966 as Bob Seger and the Last Herd. The song sold tens of thousands of copies locally and earned him a record deal, leading to more releases and growing momentum. Even when record label issues threatened his progress, Seger pressed on, eventually forming the Bob Seger System. In 1968, Ramblin' Gamblin' Man became his first major national success, finally pushing him into the spotlight. The success brought opportunities, but internal conflicts within the band soon followed, and Seger briefly stepped away from music before returning to complete one final album with the group. By the early 1970s, Seger found himself at a crossroads. His first solo acoustic album failed to gain traction, and a covers project also struggled to connect with audiences. Still, he refused to give up. In 1972, he assembled a new backing group, recording an album that showed promise but again failed to make a major impact. By the end of 1973, Seger stood alone once more, but that moment set the stage for everything that followed. Everything changed when Seger formed the Silver Bullet Band. With this new lineup, he released the album Seven in 1974, followed by Beautiful Loser in 1975. Songs like Kathmandu began receiving widespread airplay, especially in Detroit, signaling that his breakthrough was finally underway. In 1976, Seger released Live Bullet, recorded over 2 unforgettable nights in Detroit. The album captured the intensity of his live performances and earned critical praise, pushing him to a new level of recognition. Later that same year, Seger released Night Moves, the album that transformed him into a true superstar. The title track climbed high on the charts, while songs like Main Street and Rock and Roll Never Forgets became lasting favorites. The album sold millions of copies and helped audiences rediscover his earlier work. Success continued with Stranger in Town in 1978, delivering classics like Still the Same, Hollywood Nights, and We've Got Tonight. Around this time, old-time rock and roll became one of the most recognizable songs of its era, later gaining even greater popularity through film and pop culture. In 1980, Seger reached another peak with Against the Wind, an album that topped the charts and earned him Grammy Awards. Songs like Fire Lake and the title track reflected maturity, reflection, and endurance. Live albums, soundtrack contributions, and chart-topping singles followed, including Shakedown, which reached #1 and earned major industry recognition. Through the 1980s, Seger continued evolving, releasing albums like The Distance and Like a Rock, the latter becoming deeply woven into American culture. Despite massive success, Seger began stepping back in the 1990s, choosing family life over constant touring. A greatest hits album reignited global interest, selling millions of copies and proving the lasting power of his music. Honors followed, including his induction into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame and recognition from his home state of Michigan. When Seger returned with new albums and tours in the 2000s, ticket demand was stronger than ever, especially in his hometown. In later years, Seger continued performing selectively, releasing archival collections, collaborating with fellow artists, and honoring longtime friends through heartfelt performances. Health challenges and the loss of close bandmates led him to reflect deeply on the toll of touring. Eventually, after decades of unforgettable performances, Seger announced his final tour, marking the close of one of the most enduring careers in American rock history. Today, Bob Seger's legacy stands firm. His music tells stories of resilience, youth, reflection, and the passage of time. From Detroit garages to sold-out arenas, his voice became the soundtrack for generations. Even in retirement, his influence continues to resonate, proving that great songs, honest storytelling, and raw emotion never fade. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you in the next story. As the years moved forward, Bob Seger's presence in American music became something far bigger than chart numbers or album sales. His songs had grown into shared memories, woven into long drives, late nights, and moments of reflection for millions of people who felt like his music spoke directly to them. By the time the 1980s settled in, Seger wasn't just an artist riding momentum, he was a storyteller whose voice carried the weight of lived experience, and audiences trusted him because his words felt honest, grounded, and real. Even as his albums continued to succeed, Seger remained deeply aware of the personal cost that came with life on the road. Touring had always been demanding, physically and emotionally, and while he thrived on the energy of live audiences, the constant travel and separation from family slowly began to shape his outlook. This internal conflict between artistic passion and personal fulfillment became a recurring theme in both his music and his decisions behind the scenes. Songs written during this period often reflected looking back, moving forward, and trying to make sense of time slipping by, themes that resonated strongly with listeners who were growing older alongside him. Throughout the 1980s, Seger's ability to adapt without losing his identity kept him relevant in a changing musical landscape. While new sounds and styles emerged, his work remained rooted in strong melodies, emotional storytelling, and a blue-collar sincerity that never felt forced. Albums like a Rock didn't chase trends, they reinforced who he already was, and that consistency earned him lasting respect. The title track, in particular, became symbolic of resilience and endurance, qualities that mirrored Seger's own journey through decades of highs and lows. As the decade progressed, Seger's live performances continued to be a defining part of his career. His concerts were known for their intensity, emotional connection, and carefully crafted setlists that balanced new material with fan favorites. Night after night, he delivered performances that felt personal rather than routine, and that dedication strengthened the bond between him and his audience. Even as stadiums filled and accolades piled up, Seger never approached the stage casually. For him, every show mattered. Eventually, the pace began to slow, not because the demand faded, but because Seger made a conscious choice to step back. In the early 1990s, he released new material that reflected a more introspective tone. While these albums didn't dominate radio the way earlier releases had, they revealed an artist who was comfortable exploring deeper emotions without chasing mainstream approval. At the same time, Seger began prioritizing family life, something he had sacrificed for many years. This shift marked a quiet but meaningful turning point, one that showed growth not just as a musician, but as a person. When Seger temporarily stepped away from the spotlight, it wasn't an ending, but a pause. During this time, his music continued to live on through radio, film, and shared cultural moments. A greatest hits release reintroduced his catalog to a new generation, proving that his songs hadn't lost their power. In fact, they felt more relevant than ever. Listeners who had grown up with his music now shared it with their children, creating a multi-generational connection few artists ever achieve. His return to touring in the mid-1990s was met with overwhelming enthusiasm. Audiences filled arenas night after night, eager to experience the songs they had carried with them for years. The shows weren't just concerts, they felt like reunions, moments where fans and artists met again through familiar lyrics and melodies. Seger's voice, weathered but strong, carried even more emotional weight, adding depth to songs that had already become classics. Recognition followed him wherever he went. His induction into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame was more than an honor, it was an acknowledgement of his influence on American music and culture. Fellow musicians, industry veterans, and fans alike praised his authenticity, work ethic, and unwavering dedication to his craft. Seger accepted these honors with humility, always redirecting praise toward the people who supported him throughout his journey, from bandmates to fans who stayed loyal through every phase of his career. In the years that followed, Seger continued to release new music selectively, choosing quality over quantity. Albums released in the 2000s reflected wisdom gained through experience, blending reflective songwriting with the familiar sound that defined him. Tours accompanying these releases were often announced with little warning and sold out almost instantly, a testament to the lasting demand for his live performances. Particularly in Michigan, his hometown shows became legendary events, drawing fans from across the country. As time passed, Seger became increasingly aware of the physical demands of touring. Health challenges forced him to cancel or postpone performances, moments that made him reconsider how much longer he could continue at the same pace. Despite these setbacks, his determination never wavered. When he returned to the stage, he did so with the same commitment and intensity that had defined his career from the beginning. His later tours were often framed as possible farewells, though Seger himself hesitated to label them that way. For him, the idea of stepping away from performing was deeply emotional. Music had been his constant companion through hardship, success, loss, and growth. Saying goodbye to the stage meant closing a chapter that had shaped his entire identity. Still, he understood that nothing lasts forever, and that knowing when to step back was part of respecting both the music and the audience. The passing of close friends and longtime collaborators weighed heavily on him during this period. These losses weren't just professional, they were deeply personal, reminders of the long road he had traveled and the people who helped him along the way. Performing without them felt different, and at times, unimaginable. These experiences played a significant role in his final decision to retire from touring, not out of exhaustion, but out of respect for the journey and the people who shared it. When Seger officially announced his final tour, fans responded with gratitude rather than disappointment. They understood that they had been given decades of unforgettable music and performances, and that this farewell was earned. Each show on the final run felt like a celebration rather than a goodbye, filled with emotion, reflection, and appreciation on both sides of the stage. Seger delivered every performance with the same sincerity that had defined him from the beginning, leaving nothing unsaid. Since stepping away from touring, Seger's presence hasn't faded. His music continues to appear in films, television, and everyday life, often serving as a soundtrack to moments of nostalgia and reflection. New listeners continue to discover his work, finding meaning in songs written long before they were born. That enduring relevance speaks to the universal themes he captured so effortlessly: time, love, loss, hope, and the simple moments that define a life. Looking back on his career, Bob Seger's legacy is not defined by awards or records alone, but by connection. He wrote songs that felt lived in, stories that sounded like they belonged to anyone who heard them. He never chased trends or reinvented himself for the sake of attention. Instead, he stayed true to his voice, trusting that honesty would always find its audience. From a young boy in Michigan finding comfort in music, to a global icon whose songs became part of the American experience, Seger's journey is one of persistence, authenticity, and heart. His music reminds us that success isn't always about reaching the top quickly, but about staying the course, learning from setbacks, and growing with time. Even in retirement, his voice continues to echo, carrying stories that will be passed down for generations. And that is the lasting power of Bob Seger, a storyteller who turned everyday moments into timeless music, and whose journey proves that staying true to yourself can create something that never truly fades.